Hi everyone, it's meteorologist Terry Swails here on tswails.com, and this weather briefing is centered on the topic of severe weather and essentially the lack of it around eastern Iowa and western Illinois. We sure haven't seen much in the way of significant tornadoes around here in the past decade or so. The one exception to that, of course, was last November when the big EF4 roared through Washington over there in Illinois, not too far away from Peoria. But now this year you can see that we've actually reached the peak of the tornado season. That was back around June 1st or 2nd, and now the numbers are expected to gradually decline as we head into the month of July, and finally by August the season really tails off. So if you go by the statistics, the worst of it should be over here in the Midwest, and we sure haven't had too many problems as it is so far. In fact, we'll take a look at some of the tornado numbers for you here, and actually around the country only 580 this year. The three-year average is over 1,100, almost 1,200. So we've seen about 50% of what you'd expect to see here if you go by the three-year averages. And now as we take a look at this next graphic, you'll also be able to see that if you take a look at the numbers here, we're actually below the 25th percentile as far as the number of tornadoes that have occurred this year. The all-time low is 399. This year we've had 600. And the highest at this point in the year, June 24th, was 1,126. So once again, we're about 50% short of the all-time high. So some very good news in the numbers we're looking at there. This is interesting too. If you go back about the last 10 years, notice that the eastern Iowa, northwestern Illinois, and up into the upper Midwest just has not seen much in the way of significant tornado activity. So far this year, the core of our tornadoes this year have been down in Arkansas and in northwestern Mississippi. You can see that little white circle there. And actually, for the last 10 years or so, that's kind of been the epicenter. That's where the things have really been popping as far as tornado goes. That includes places like eastern Oklahoma down into Arkansas and then through the southeast. A lot of places in Mississippi, Alabama, parts of western Kentucky and Tennessee. Those regions have seen a lot of tornadoes. That's where the real focus has been, and the further north you go, the less there's been. So some real good news for us in that respect. Now as we take a look at the next few days, I don't see much threat for severe weather anywhere close to eastern Iowa, western Illinois, or really for that matter much of the Midwest, but that is expected to change a little bit here as we get towards Saturday. You can see the Storm Prediction Center does have a risk region outlined from northwestern Iowa up into much of Minnesota, and by the time we get to Sunday and Monday, there's a pretty good possibility that some of that risk will move further to the east-southeast as a front and some energy begins to move into the Midwest. But I sure don't see any problems around my immediate area until at least Sunday and probably more like Monday. That system, though, is still expected to bring some significant rainfall to parts of the Midwest, something that we certainly don't need around here. This is the new GFS model, and it shows precipitation totals substantial once again from around Chicago and up into southern Wisconsin near Milwaukee, and then back into the northern one-half to one-third of Iowa and into northeast Nebraska. And that is a region that's just gotten a real soaking this year, and it sure looks to me like more heavy rain is going to be a possibility as we get later into the weekend and early next week. Here's a little tighter view of all of that, and while the numbers are down just a little bit from the afternoon run, the model still indicates a pretty good corridor of heavy rains, 2 to 4 inches there across about the northern half of Iowa and up into southern Wisconsin and extreme northwestern Illinois. So that's kind of been moving around just a little bit, and that's a trend I expect that'll continue in the models here in the next couple of days. It's pretty tough for them to predict convection this far out, but the trends are definitely there. It's been consistent in showing heavy rainfall of several inches in some parts of the central or upper Midwest, and that's a part of the forecast that needs to be watched closely with all the precipitation that's been falling here in the past couple of weeks. So that's tonight's special briefing on severe weather or the lack of it around our region, and we'll see if we can keep it that way for several more days. But later on in the weekend, we'll keep our eyes out for that next threat of any strong thunderstorms and potentially some heavy rain moving back into the region as well. Thanks for visiting tswails.com, and as always, roll weather.